On a narrow strip of land between the Atlantic Ocean and Lake Worth in Palm Beach, Florida, sits a structure that is more than just a home. It is 110,000 square feet of Spanish Moorish architecture, 126 rooms, and a history so thick with scandal, power, and opulence that it feels less like a residence and more like a character in a Greek tragedy. This is Mar-a-Lago, Latin for sea to lake. To some, it is a monument to American success, a bastion of old-world elegance. To others, it is the most controversial square footage on the planet, a fortress of political secrets and a symbol of a divided nation. But long before it was a winter White House, and long before the golden letters of a future president were etched into its gates, Mar-a-Lago was the fevered dream of the richest woman in America. Today, we peel back the layers of gold leaf to reveal the dark, the divine, and the deeply strange story of America's most controversial mansion. To understand the controversy, you have to understand the creator, Marjorie Merriweather Post. By the age of 27, Marjorie was the wealthiest woman in the United States, having inherited the Postum Cereal Company, the empire that would eventually become General Foods. Marjorie didn't just want a vacation home. She wanted a palace that would rival the royalty of Europe. In 1924, she hired Marion Sims Wyeth and Joseph Urban, a renowned stage designer for the Ziegfeld Follies, to bring her vision to life. This choice was intentional. She didn't want a house. She wanted a stage. The stats of the original build are staggering, even by today's standards. Marjorie spent $7 million in 1927, roughly $120 million in today's currency. She imported 3 boatloads of Dorian stone from Italy. She sourced 36,000 antique Spanish tiles, some dating back to the 15th century. The living room ceiling is a literal copy of the 1,000-wing ceiling in the Accademia in Venice, covered in so much gold leaf that it reportedly exhausted the nation's supply during construction. But beneath the gold, there was a sense of isolation. Marjorie was creating a world she could control, a theme that would echo through the mansion's halls for the next century. For decades, Mar-a-Lago was the undisputed center of the Palm Beach social universe. Marjorie Merriweather Post ruled with an iron fist and a velvet glove. The mansion wasn't just for show. It was a diplomatic tool. She hosted the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, the elite of Wall Street, and the power players of Washington. But there was a darkness to this level of wealth. The maintenance alone required a literal army of staff. The Cedar Lake estate was a bubble of extreme excess, while the rest of the country grappled with the Great Depression and World War II. Marjorie was known to be a generous philanthropist, but the sheer scale of Mar-a-Lago started to become a burden. The first shadow of controversy. As Marjorie aged, she became obsessed with the legacy of the house. She realized that no individual, not even her own children, could likely afford to keep the lights on in a 126-room Mediterranean maze. She began to look for a way to immortalize the estate. In her will, she made a move that would set the stage for the next 50 years of legal battles. She gifted the estate to the United States government. Her dream? That Mar-a-Lago would become a permanent retreat for U.S. presidents, a winter White House. When Marjorie passed away in 1973, the U.S. government accepted the gift, but they quickly realized they had inherited a white elephant. The tax dollars required to maintain the gold leaf, the grounds, and the security for a property that no president seemed to want to visit. Nixon preferred his own Florida White House in Key Biscayne. Became a political nightmare. By 1981, the government did the unthinkable. They gave it back. They returned the estate to the Post Foundation, citing the $1 million a year maintenance cost. Mar-a-Lago sat vacant. The gardens began to overgrow. The palace on the hill was becoming a relic, a ghost of a gilded age that no longer existed. It was a 17-acre prime piece of real estate that nobody could afford to run, and the city of Palm Beach was considering tearing it down to subdivide the land, until a brash, young real estate mogul from New York City saw a for sale sign and decided to start a war. We look at the hostile takeover. How a series of aggressive legal maneuvers and a spite wall allowed a New York developer to snatch the crown jewel of Palm Beach for a fraction of its value, and how he turned a private home into a high-stakes members club. The year was 1980, and the crown jewel of Palm Beach was rotting from the inside out. Mar-a-Lago, the once shining monument to Marjorie Merriweather Post cereal empire, had become a financial black hole. The U.S. government had surrendered it. The Post Foundation couldn't afford it, and the town of Palm Beach was terrified of it. It was too big to live in, too expensive to maintain, and too historic to tear down. It was a 17-acre ghost story. Enter a young, brash real estate developer from New York City with a penchant for gold and even stronger appetite for a fight. Donald J. Trump. At the time, Trump was a rising star of Manhattan, the man behind the glass and steel of Trump Tower. But he wanted a foothold in the most exclusive zip code in America. He didn't just want a house in Palm Beach. He wanted the house. He offered the Post Foundation $15 million for this estate. It was a fair offer for a property that was bleeding money. But the foundation, perhaps sensing the brashness of the man across the table, turned him down. They wanted $25 million, and they weren't willing to budge for a New York outsider. Most people would have negotiated or walked away. But this is where the story of Mar-a-Lago shifts from a real estate deal into a psychological war. Trump didn't raise his offer. Instead, he did something far more calculated. He found a loophole. He discovered that a small strip of land between the Mar-a-Lago mansion and the ocean, a piece of beachfront that was essential for the state's view and value, was for sale separately. He bought that strip of land for $2 million through a third party. Then, he sent a message to the Post Foundation that was effectively a declaration of war. He told them that he intended to build a massive, ugly home on that strip of land. A home so tall and so poorly designed that it would completely block Mar-a-Lago's view of the Atlantic Ocean. He told them he would turn their $25 million masterpiece into a backyard view of a concrete wall. The value of Mar-a-Lago plummeted overnight. No billionaire wanted to buy a historic mansion whose only view was the back of a Trump-owned eyesore. The foundation was trapped. In 1985, they finally buckled. Trump bought the entire estate. The 126 rooms, the 36,000 Spanish tiles, the gold leaf ceilings, and the 17 acres of prime land for a combined total of less than $8 million. It was one of the greatest distressed real estate heists in American history. But owning the mansion was only the beginning of the controversy. When Trump moved in, he didn't just live there, he occupied it. He began a massive renovation, but not the kind of preservation the high society neighbors of Palm Beach expected. He added a 20,000-square-foot ballroom, encrusting it with another $7 million worth of gold leaf. He put in a professional-grade hair salon. He turned Marjorie's quiet sanctuary into a high-decibel statement of wealth. The neighbors were horrified. Palm Beach is a town built on old money, the kind of money that is quiet, polite, and stays behind tall hedges. Trump was new money, and he was loud. He began flying a massive American flag on an 80-foot pole, which violated city ordinances. When the town fined him $1,250 a day, he didn't lower the flag. He sued the town for $25 million, claiming they were violating his right to free speech. This was the birth of the Mar-a-Lago we know today, a place defined by litigation, ego, and a refusal to follow the rules of the elite. By the early 1990s, however, even a billionaire's pockets have limits. Trump's casino empire in Atlantic City was struggling, and the $3 million annual maintenance cost of Mar-a-Lago was becoming a burden. He needed the house to pay for itself. His solution? He decided to turn his private residence into a private club. This move sent shockwaves through Palm Beach. In this exclusive enclave, clubs were segregated by design. Some didn't allow Jews, others didn't allow African Americans. But Trump, ever the disruptor, opened the doors of Mar-a-Lago to anyone who could afford the $100,000 initiation fee. He welcomed Jewish members, black members, and anyone else the old guard had spent decades keeping out. Was it a move for civil rights? Or was it a brilliant business strategy to stick it to the neighbors who had snubbed him? In the world of Mar-a-Lago, the answer is usually both. The club became a massive success, but it turned the mansion into a hybrid entity. It was half home, half hotel. It was a place where a member could be eating a steak at one table while the future president of the United States was discussing top-secret business at the next. This blurred line between private life and public commerce will become the foundation for the biggest controversies yet to come. As the 2000s rolled in, Mar-a-Lago wasn't just a club anymore. It was a brand. It was the backdrop for The Apprentice. It was the site of celebrity weddings. It was a monument to the Trump persona. But as the gold leaf thickened and the membership grew, the mansion was quietly preparing for its most dramatic transformation yet. Because the man who had tricked the foundation into selling him a palace was about to set his sights on an even bigger house, the White House. And Mar-a-Lago was about to go from a social club to a global center of power and a target for the FBI. In 2016, the world changed, and with it, the soul of Mar-a-Lago changed forever. The man who had once fought the town of Palm Beach over the height of a flagpole was now the leader of the free world, and the private club that the old money elites had once snubbed was suddenly the most powerful 17 acres on the planet. Donald Trump didn't just go to the White House. He brought the White House to Florida. He dubbed it the Winter White House. But while the name sounded regal, the reality was a logistical and security nightmare that the world had never seen. Imagine a place where some of the world's most sensitive state secrets are being discussed. Usually, these conversations happen in the Situation Room, a windowless, soundproof bunker in the West Wing, shielded by layers of lead and encryption. But at Mar-a-Lago, the Situation Room was often the candlelit terrace of a public dining club. In February 2017, the tension between luxury and national security reached a breaking point. While President Trump was hosting Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe for dinner, North Korea launched a ballistic missile. In any other presidency, the leaders would have vanished into a secure room. At Mar-a-Lago, they stayed at their table. As other club members ate their wedge salads and sipped wine, they watched in real time as the two world leaders reviewed sensitive documents. Members even took photos of the scene, the glow of their iPhone flashlights illuminating documents that were likely classified. It was a level of transparency that horrified the intelligence community. For the first time in history, a $200,000 club membership didn't just get you a locker and a pool. It got you a front row seat to a global crisis. This open-door policy toward power made Mar-a-Lago the ultimate target for every intelligence agency on Earth. If you were a foreign spy, you didn't need to hack the Pentagon. You just needed to blend in at the Mar-a-Lago omelet station. The threats weren't just theoretical. In 2019, a Chinese national named Yu Jingzhong walked up to the Mar-a-Lago security perimeter. She was carrying 4 cell phones, a laptop, an external hard drive, and a thumb drive that federal investigators later found was infected with malicious software. She managed to pass through the initial checkpoints by claiming she was there for a United Nations Chinese-American Association event, an event that didn't even exist. She wasn't the only one. Another Chinese woman, Lu Jing, was arrested for trespassing and filming the property. The mansion had become a magnet for international intrigue. The Secret Service was now tasked with an impossible mission, protecting the president in a building where hundreds of private citizens, their guests, and temporary catering staff move in and out every single day. But the controversy wasn't just about who was coming in. It was about what was being kept inside. Behind the scenes, the staff at Mar-a-Lago were witnessing things that would later form the basis of federal indictments. We now know that as the Trump presidency came to an end in early 2021, dozens of cardboard boxes were being packed to the White House and shipped south. These weren't just boxes of golf shirts and memorabilia. They contained some of the most guarded secrets of the United States government. Nuclear programs, military vulnerabilities, and top-secret intelligence briefings. When Trump left office and moved to Mar-a-Lago full-time, the mansion transitioned from a part-time retreat to a permanent fortress. But it was a fortress with a storage problem. Classified documents were being moved from the business center to a gilded bathroom, then to a storage room accessible by a hallway where club members walked. Photos would later emerge showing stacks of boxes, marked with secret and top-secret headers, piled high next to a toilet and a shower. To the intelligence community, it was a catastrophe. To the residents of Mar-a-Lago, it was just part of the decor. For over a year, a quiet tug-of-war played out between the National Archives and the former president. The government wanted their records back. Trump insisted they were his. It was a slow-motion collision that was heading straight for a historic explosion. The National Archives warned that items were missing, including the famous love letters from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. By early 2022, after months of negotiation, 15 boxes were finally returned. But when the archivists opened them, their blood ran cold. They found over 180 unique classified documents scattered amongst news clippings and personal letters. The FBI was called in. A grand jury was seated. And for the first time in the history of the American presidency, the government began to suspect that a former commander-in-chief was intentionally withholding national defense information in a private social club. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of the American legal system. The peaceful palm trees and golden towers of Mar-a-Lago were about to be swarmed by federal agents in windbreakers. The gilded dream was about to become a crime scene. August 8th, 2022. The Florida heat was oppressive, but outside the gates of Mar-a-Lago, everything seemed routine. The palm trees swayed in the Atlantic breeze, and the gold-hued walls stood silent. But early that morning, a motorcade of unmarked SUVs pulled up to the main entrance. These weren't club members arriving for a round of golf. They were FBI agents armed with federal search warrants and the eyes of the entire world. For the first time in American history, the private residence of a former president was being searched by federal authorities. Donald Trump was in New York at the time, but he quickly ignited the digital world with a fiery statement. My beautiful home, Mar-a-Lago, is currently under siege, raided, and occupied by a large group of FBI agents. They even broke into my safe. The FBI, however, wasn't there for a safe. They were hunting for national defense information, secrets so sensitive that their presence in a private social club was considered a catastrophic risk to national security. As agents moved through the storage rooms, the 45 office, and even the former president's private suite, they uncovered a scene that would soon shock the nation. Behind the shower curtains of a gold-plated bathroom, on the stage of a grand ballroom, and inside storage rooms cluttered with old newspapers, were stacks of cardboard boxes. Inside those boxes were documents bearing the highest classification markings, top secret, and sensitive compartmented information SCI. These were secrets meant to be viewed only in lead-lined, signal-blocked rooms known as SIFs. Yet here they were, sitting in a Mediterranean mansion where thousands of people cycled through every week for weddings, dinners, and parties. The Justice Department later released a photo that became the defining image of the controversy, a scattering of documents on a floral carpet, surrounded by bright yellow and red top-secret cover sheets. Mar-a-Lago was no longer just a luxury resort. It had been transformed into a federal crime scene. What followed was a legal war that would span years. Special Counsel Jack Smith was appointed to lead the prosecution. He leveled 40 felony counts against Donald Trump, alleging that he not only mishandled classified documents, but engaged in a conspiracy to obstruct justice. The indictment claimed that Trump's employees, Walt Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira, had moved boxes to hide them from the FBI and even discussed deleting security camera footage to cover their tracks. But Mar-a-Lago had one more twist in its long history of survival. The case was assigned to Judge Aileen Cannon, a federal judge whom Trump himself had appointed. For 2 years, the case became a quagmire of delays, technicalities, and pre-trial motions. While the world waited for a trial of the century, the proceedings slowed to a crawl. Then came the 2024 election. Donald Trump's victory changed the legal landscape overnight. Under Department of Justice policy, a sitting president cannot be prosecuted by the federal government. By early 2025, the criminal cases were essentially put into a deep freeze, and Jack Smith was forced to withdraw the charges. The crime scene had returned to being the seat of power. However, the shadows over the mansion didn't vanish with the legal victory. As 2026 arrived, the security threats became more visceral. In February 2026, the quiet of the Palm Beach night was shattered. A 21-year-old armed man named Austin Tucker Martin managed to breach the Mar-a-Lago security perimeter at 1:30 a.m. Carrying a shotgun and a canister of gasoline, he bypassed the initial gates. Secret Service agents, now operating under the highest alert levels in the estate's history, confronted him near the living quarters. In a matter of seconds, the silence was broken by gunfire. Martin was killed on the spot. The investigation that followed revealed a disturbing reality. Martin wasn't an anti-Trump activist. He was a radicalized supporter who had become obsessed with unsealing secret files he believed were hidden in the mansion, specifically those involving the Jeffrey Epstein case. Even in 2026, The mansion was still perceived by the public as a vault of secrets, a place where the world's most dangerous truths were kept under lock and key. Just days after the security breach, Judge Aileen Cannon delivered a final blow to the document saga. She permanently blocked the public release of the special counsel's full report on the classified files, arguing that releasing the details would cause irreparable harm to a president who had never been convicted of a crime. Today, Mar-a-Lago stands as a monument to collision of power, law, and ego. When you look at its golden towers now, you don't just see a relic of the Gilded Age or a high-end social club. You see a fortress that successfully defied the United States Department of Justice. It is a place where a billionaire fought the FBI and won. Mar-a-Lago is no longer just a house. It is a symbol of a new era of American politics, one where the walls of a private club are stronger than the traditional guardrails of the government. By 2026, Mar-a-Lago had evolved into something the world had never seen, a privatized seat of government. In the traditional halls of power, the West Wing of the State Department, there are logs, transcripts, and protocols. There is a paper trail that ensures the American people know who is whispering in the president's ear. But at Mar-a-Lago, those rules don't apply. Here, the deep state isn't a shadow bureaucracy. It's a collection of high-paying members and foreign dignitaries eating shrimp cocktail at the table next to the commander-in-chief. This is the era of the shadow government, where the world's most consequential decisions are made over dinner music and clinking silverware. The controversy began almost the moment the club opened to political business. Critics called it pay-to-play on steroids. To get a meeting with the leader of the free world, you didn't need a diplomatic credential. You needed a $200,000 membership, a fee that doubled as Trump's political influence grew. This turned Mar-a-Lago into a literal marketplace for access. Whether you were a billionaire lobbyist, a foreign prince, or a corporate titan, the path to the president was as simple as booking a room at the club. But the real drama happens in the Blue Room and the private terraces after the sun goes down. In these rooms, the usual diplomatic guardrails are gone. There are no stenographers. There are no National Security Council officials taking notes to ensure the president isn't making promises the country can't keep. Instead, there is an environment of total informality. We know from leaked accounts that foreign leaders, from Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro to Hungary's Viktor Orbán, have treated Mar-a-Lago as a backdoor to American foreign policy. For these leaders, Mar-a-Lago offers something the White House cannot: total privacy from the press and the public. It is a place where deals can be struck without the prying eyes of Congress. But this privacy is a double-edged sword. To the intelligence community, every unregulated meeting at the club is a potential leak. Every person serving a drink or cleaning a room is a potential source of information for a foreign power. The security risks of this shadow government became painfully clear during the various international crises of the mid-2020s. When tensions flared in the Middle East or trade wars with China reached a boiling point, the war room wasn't always in Washington. It was often moved to the Mar-a-Lago patio. Members of the club have recounted scenes of the president sitting at his usual table, surrounded by his inner circle, while the rest of the club watched in awe. They weren't just watching a meal. They were watching history being made in real time. But history made in a social club is history that can be sold. The FBI and the Department of Justice have long been concerned about the insider nature of the club. In 2026, investigations surfaced regarding Tier 1 members, a select group of ultra-wealthy individuals who reportedly had 24/7 access to the president's private quarters. These weren't elected officials. These were donors and businessmen who were allegedly influencing cabinet appointments and environmental regulations between rounds of golf. The controversy surrounding Mar-a-Lago as a shadow White House also extends to the staff. Unlike the White House staff, who undergo rigorous background checks and are bound by federal ethics laws, the Mar-a-Lago staff are private employees. Many are international workers on H-2B visas. While most are hardworking professionals, the sheer turnover and lack of federal oversight make it a soft target for espionage. In early 2026, a whistleblower from the club's catering department claimed that recording devices had been found hidden in the ornamental molding of the gold ballroom. The source of the bugs? Unknown. It could have been a foreign intelligence agency, a rival political campaign, or even a tabloid journalist. In a place where power is as concentrated and as accessible, everyone is listening. Despite the scandals, the shadow government at Mar-a-Lago only seems to grow stronger. The club has become the definitive kingmaker for the Republican Party. If you are a candidate running for office anywhere in the United States, your first stop isn't your local town hall. It's the Mar-a-Lago ballroom. You need the endorsement, you need the photo op, and you need the blessing of the man at the center of the storm. This has created a bizarre political ecosystem. Palm Beach, once a quiet retreat for the elderly rich, is now the most heavily guarded town in America. The streets are frequently closed for motorcades. Black-tinted SUVs are as common as palm trees. And at the center of it all is a 126-room mansion that has effectively replaced the traditional institutions of American power. Mar-a-Lago has become a sovereign state within a state. It has its own rules, its own security, and its own hierarchy. It is a place where the American dream has been refined into its most potent and most controversial form, power without accountability. But as the 2026 elections approach, the pressure on this shadow government is reaching a breaking point. The world is watching to see if the mansion can survive another round of scrutiny, or if the weight of its own secrets will finally cause the golden ceilings to collapse. In the world of ultra-high-end real estate, there is luxury, and then there is Mar-a-Lago. To step inside its gates is to leave the 21st century behind and enter a fever dream of 16th century Spanish Moorish opulence, filtered through the lens of a 1980s billionaire. But the controversy of Mar-a-Lago isn't just about the politics discussed in its halls. It is about the very walls themselves. For decades, architectural critics and high society snobs have waged a war of words over the mansion's aesthetic. To some, it is a preserved masterpiece of the Gilded Age. To others, it is a definition of tacky, a gaudy, over-the-top display of wealth that values shine over substance. At the heart of this debate is the gold. Marjorie Merriweather Post didn't just like gold. She obsessed over it. When the 20,000-square-foot ballroom was added, Donald Trump didn't just renovate it. He encrusted it. $7 million worth of gold leaf was applied to the intricate carvings and crown moldings. In the gold room, the walls are so bright, they practically vibrate under the massive crystal chandeliers. Critics argue that this aesthetic of excess is a psychological tool. It is designed to overwhelm the visitor. When you are surrounded by that much gold, that many 15th century Spanish tiles and 500-year-old Italian marble, it is hard to feel like an equal. You are meant to feel like a subject in a palace. This is why Mar-a-Lago is so central to the Trump brand. It isn't about subtle power. It's about power you can see from across the room. But beneath the gold leaf, there is a strange, almost haunting contrast. Because Mar-a-Lago is a historic landmark, many parts of the house cannot be changed. This leads to a bizarre time capsule effect. You might walk through a ballroom that looks like Versailles, only to turn a corner and find a bathroom with fixtures that look like they haven't been updated since the Nixon administration. This mix of global superpower hub and aging Florida hotel is what makes the mansion so polarizing. Members pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to sit on Louis XIV-style chairs that might be slightly frayed at the edges. They eat Trump wedge salads on fine china, while Secret Service agents with earpieces stand next to 1920s tapestries. It is a surreal blend of the historic and the commercial. Then there is the Mar-a-Lago uniform. In Palm Beach, style is usually quiet luxury, linen shirts, loafers, and pastel colors. But Mar-a-Lago has its own culture. It is a place of dark suits, red ties, and evening gowns, even in the humid Florida heat. The culture of the club is one of performance. Everyone there is on stage, playing a role in the grand drama of the mansion. This performance extends to the Wall of Fame. Throughout the club, photos of the owner with world leaders, celebrities, and athletes line the corridors. It is a visual resume, a constant reminder to every guest and member that they are in the presence of someone who has conquered every industry he touched. But the gold standard has a darker side. Maintenance in a salt-air environment like Palm Beach is a never-ending battle. The Atlantic Ocean is constantly trying to eat the mansion. The salt air corrodes the stone. The humidity warps the ancient wood. The hurricanes threaten the 75-foot tower. Keeping Mar-a-Lago looking perfect requires an army of hidden workers, painters, gilders, and stonemasons, who work in the shadows to ensure the illusion of eternal wealth never fades. The controversy peaked in 2024 when local preservationists accused the club of over-commercializing the historic site. They argued that by hosting massive political rallies and noisy fundraisers on the lawn, the structural integrity of the 1927 foundation was being put at risk. But in typical Mar-a-Lago fashion, the complaints were met with a shrug and another coat of gold paint. To the supporters of the mansion, the aesthetic is a middle finger to the minimalist elites of New York and San Francisco. They see the gold and the marble as a return to American greatness, a time when we weren't afraid to build things that were big, loud, and unashamedly expensive. To them, Mar-a-Lago isn't tacky. It's aspirational. But to the skeptics, the mansion is a Potemkin village, a grand facade built to hide the cracks underneath. They point to the lawsuits, the FBI raids, and the security breaches as proof that no amount of gold leaf can hide a chaotic reality. As we move further into 2026, the gold standard of Mar-a-Lago has become a cultural Rorschach test. When you look at a photo of the grand dining room, do you see a majestic piece of American history? Or do you see a gaudy monument to ego? Your answer probably says more about your politics than it does about architecture. Mar-a-Lago remains a house divided, not just by its sea-to-lake geography, but by the very way the world perceives its beauty. It is the only place on earth where a 15th century Spanish tile and a 2026 political slogan can live on the same wall. And somehow, in the strange logic of Palm Beach, it all makes sense. In the world of ultra-high-end real estate, there is luxury, and then there is Mar-a-Lago. To step inside its gates is to leave the 21st century behind and enter a fever dream of 16th century Spanish Moorish opulence, filtered through the lens of a 1980s billionaire. But the controversy of Mar-a-Lago isn't just about the politics discussed in its halls. It is about the very walls themselves. For decades, architectural critics and high society snobs have waged a war of words over the mansion's aesthetic. To some, it is a preserved masterpiece of the Gilded Age. To others, it is a definition of tacky, a gaudy, over-the-top display of wealth that values shine over substance. At the heart of this debate is the gold. Marjorie Merriweather Post didn't just like gold. She obsessed over it. When the 20,000-square-foot ballroom was added, Donald Trump didn't just renovate it. He encrusted it. $7 million worth of gold leaf was applied to the intricate carvings and crown moldings. In the gold room, the walls are so bright, they practically vibrate under the massive crystal chandeliers. Critics argue that this aesthetic of excess is a psychological tool. It is designed to overwhelm the visitor. When you are surrounded by that much gold, that many 15th century Spanish tiles and 500-year-old Italian marble, it is hard to feel like an equal. You are meant to feel like a subject in a palace. This is why Mar-a-Lago is so central to the Trump brand. It isn't about subtle power. It's about power you can see from across the room. But beneath the gold leaf, there is a strange, almost haunting contrast. Because Mar-a-Lago is a historic landmark, many parts of the house cannot be changed. This leads to a bizarre time capsule effect. You might walk through a ballroom that looks like Versailles, only to turn a corner and find a bathroom with fixtures that look like they haven't been updated since the Nixon administration. This mix of global superpower hub and aging Florida hotel is what makes the mansion so polarizing. Members pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to sit on Louis XIV-style chairs that might be slightly frayed at the edges. They eat Trump wedge salads on fine china, while Secret Service agents with earpieces stand next to 1920s tapestries. It is a surreal blend of the historic and the commercial. Then there is the Mar-a-Lago uniform. In Palm Beach, style is usually quiet luxury, linen shirts, loafers, and pastel colors. But Mar-a-Lago has its own culture. It is a place of dark suits, red ties, and evening gowns, even in the humid Florida heat. The culture of the club is one of performance. Everyone there is on stage, playing a role in the grand drama of the mansion. This performance extends to the Wall of Fame. Throughout the club, photos of the owner with world leaders, celebrities, and athletes line the corridors. It is a visual resume, a constant reminder to every guest and member that they are in the presence of someone who has conquered every industry he touched. But the gold standard has a darker side. Maintenance in a salt-air environment like Palm Beach is a never-ending battle. The Atlantic Ocean is constantly trying to eat the mansion. The salt air corrodes the stone. The humidity warps the ancient wood. The hurricanes threaten the 75-foot tower. Keeping Mar-a-Lago looking perfect requires an army of hidden workers, painters, gilders, and stonemasons, who work in the shadows to ensure the illusion of eternal wealth never fades. The controversy peaked in 2024 when local preservationists accused the club of over-commercializing the historic site. They argued that by hosting massive political rallies and noisy fundraisers on the lawn, the structural integrity of the 1927 foundation was being put at risk. But in typical Mar-a-Lago fashion, the complaints were met with a shrug and another coat of gold paint. To the supporters of the mansion, the aesthetic is a middle finger to the minimalist elites of New York and San Francisco. They see the gold and the marble as a return to American greatness, a time when we weren't afraid to build things that were big, loud, and unashamedly expensive. To them, Mar-a-Lago isn't tacky. It's aspirational. But to the skeptics, the mansion is a Potemkin village, a grand facade built to hide the cracks underneath. They point to the lawsuits, the FBI raids, and the security breaches as proof that no amount of gold leaf can hide a chaotic reality. As we move further into 2026, the gold standard of Mar-a-Lago has become a cultural Rorschach test. When you look at a photo of the grand dining room, do you see a majestic piece of American history? Or do you see a gaudy monument to ego? Your answer probably says more about your politics than it does about architecture. Mar-a-Lago remains a house divided, not just by its sea to lake geography, but by the very way the world perceives its beauty. It is the only place on earth where a 15th century Spanish tile and a 2026 political slogan can live on the same wall. And somehow, in the strange logic of Palm Beach, it all makes sense. Behind every gold leaf door and beneath every 15th century chandelier at Mar-a-Lago, there's a world that the members never see. It is a world of service elevators, underground tunnels, and industrial kitchens. This is a realm of the kitchen cabinet. The hundreds of housekeepers, servers, gardeners, and security details who see the most controversial mansion in America without its makeup on. In the story of Mar-a-Lago, the staff aren't just employees. They're the silent witnesses to history, and their proximity to power is the source of the mansion's deepest leaks and most protected secrets. Running a 126-room estate is not a job. It is a logistical war. The salt air of the Atlantic is a constant enemy, corroding the stonework and dulling the gold. To keep the mansion in its presidential state, a small army works around the clock. But unlike the staff of the White House, who are government employees vetted by the FBI with top-secret clearances, the staff at Mar-a-Lago are private hires. Many are seasonal workers brought in from Romania, Ireland, and South America on H-2B visas. This creates a strange paradox at the heart of the mansion. While the world's most sensitive political strategies are discussed on the patio, the person refilling the water glass might have arrived in the country only 3 weeks prior. The controversy surrounding the staff reached a boiling point during the federal investigations of 2023 and 2024. As the special counsel looked into the mishandling of classified documents, they didn't just look at the politicians, they looked at the invisible people. They looked at the valet, Walt Nauta, and the property manager, Carlos de Oliveira. These men weren't policy experts or high-ranking advisors. They were loyalists who had spent years in the inner circle of the house. The federal indictments painted a picture of a kitchen cabinet that was asked to do more than just manage a club. They were allegedly asked to move boxes of state secrets, to check security cameras, and to stay silent. In the world of Mar-a-Lago, loyalty to the boss often supersedes loyalty to the bureaucracy of Washington. It is a culture of omerta, a code of silence reinforced by strict non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, that every employee is required to sign. But NDAs cannot stop the rumors. For years, the Palm Beach grapevine has been fueled by stories from former Mar-a-Lago staffers. They speak of the president's specific habits: the well-done steaks with ketchup served in the formal dining room, the specific temperature the gold ballroom must be kept at, and the way the boss would hand-pick the music for club Sunday dinners using an iPad. There are also darker whispers. Staffers have described the intense pressure working in a high-target environment. After the FBI raid in 2022, the atmosphere inside the kitchen cabinet shifted from service to suspicion. Every new hire was looked at as a potential mole for the Justice Department. Security protocols were tightened, not just for the guests, but for the people cleaning the rooms. In early 2026, the mystery of the Mar-a-Lago tunnels resurfaced in the news. Legends have long persisted that Marjorie Merriweather Post built a series of bomb shelters and tunnels beneath the estate during the Cold War. While some of these are merely utility corridors for plumbing and electricity, insiders claim that during the winter White House years, these tunnels were reinforced. They became the secure corridors where the president could move from his private quarters to the office without being seen by club members or paparazzi drones. The staff who work these corridors occupy a unique social space. They are often treated as part of the family until they aren't. In the high-stakes world of Mar-a-Lago, a single mistake, a leaked photo of a guest, a misplaced document, or a comment to a reporter can result in an immediate lifetime ban from the property. But as we move further into 2026, the kitchen cabinet is facing a new challenge, technology. With the rise of AI-driven surveillance and sophisticated bugs, the human staff are no longer the only ones watching. The mansion is now a fortress of signal jammers and white noise generators designed to prevent the very secrets the staff witness from leaving the grounds. Yet, for all the high-tech security, it is the human element that remains the most controversial. Critics point to the use of foreign labor as a security flaw, while supporters see it as a testament to the American dream that the club represents. They argue that the staff are fiercely loyal because the boss treats them better than the old-money elites of Palm Beach ever did. In the end, the staff of Mar-a-Lago are the keepers of the flame. They know which rooms are truly haunted by the ghost of Marjorie Post. They know which gold leaf panels are actually hollow, and they know what was really in those boxes stacked in the bathroom. They are the narrators of a story that may never be fully told, protected by the very walls they spend their lives cleaning. As the sun sets over the Lake Worth side of the estate and the kitchen cabinet prepares for another night of high-stakes galas and secret meetings, one thing is certain. At Mar-a-Lago, the help sees everything, hears everything, and, if the NDAs hold, says nothing. In a house as old and as laden with history as Mar-a-Lago, the living are rarely the only ones occupying the rooms. Beyond the political firestorms and the gold-leafed aesthetics lies a layer of the mansion that few talk about in public, but many whisper about in private, the paranormal. For decades, guests, staff, and even members of the inner circle have claimed that the spirit of the woman who built this palace, Marjorie Merriweather Post, has never truly left. To understand the ghost of Mar-a-Lago, you have to understand Marjorie's obsession with her creation. She didn't just build a house. She built a monument to her own immortality. When she died in 1973, she left behind a meticulously detailed set of instructions for how the house should be run, from the arrangement of the flowers to the specific frequency of the dusting. Some say her will was so strong that it tethered her soul to the 126 rooms she loved more than any of her 4 husbands. The rumors of hauntings aren't just modern tabloid fodder. They date back to the late 1970s, during the period when the U.S. government owned the property. Security guards stationed at the vacant mansion reported hearing the sound of silk dresses rustling in empty hallways. They described the scent of expensive French perfume, specifically the jasmine heavy scent Marjorie favored, wafting through the closed-up rooms in the middle of the night. One of the most frequent hotspots for paranormal activity is the Bicentennial Suite, which served as Marjorie's primary bedroom. Staff members have claimed that the temperature in the room can drop 20 degrees in seconds, even in the sweltering Florida summer. Others have reported seeing a faint, elegant figure standing on the balcony overlooking Lake Worth, staring out the water as if waiting for a guest who never arrives. But the controversy of the ghost took a darker turn when Donald Trump bought the estate in 1985. According to some Palm Beach lore, the transition from a quiet, dignified museum piece to a loud, commercialized social club didn't sit well with the spirit of the serial queen. In the early years of the Trump era, construction workers reported tools disappearing and reappearing in locker rooms. Chandeliers in the gold ballroom would allegedly sway and tinkle even when the air conditioning was off and the windows were sealed. Some believe that Marjorie's spirit is protective. They point to the fact that despite being in one of the most hurricane-prone regions in the world, Mar-a-Lago has survived nearly a century of storms with remarkably little structural damage. It's as if an invisible hand is holding the Spanish tiles in place, while the rest of Palm Beach is battered by the Atlantic. However, the haunted reputation of Mar-a-Lago serves a deeper purpose in its controversial story. It adds to the mythology of the place. In 2026, as the mansion has become a global center of power, the stories of ghosts have shifted. Some suggest that the house itself collects the energy of the people who pass through it. With so many high-stakes meetings, angry litigations, and historical pivots happening within these walls, the spiritual weight of the property has become immense. Psychologists might call it topophilia, a strong sense of place. But to those who work the night shifts at Mar-a-Lago, it feels much more literal. In 2024, a leaked security log allegedly mentioned an incident where motion sensors in the gold room were triggered repeatedly between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. When security arrived, the room was empty, but the grand piano, a historic piece from Marjorie's era, was found with its lid open, despite being closed during the final sweep of the night. The controversy of the hauntings also intersects with the secret vaults. For years, there have been rumors that Marjorie Post was buried on the grounds, or that she hidden spiritual treasures within the foundation of the house to ensure its prosperity. While her remains actually lie at her other estate, Hillwood, in Washington, D.C., the belief that her essence remains at Mar-a-Lago persists. For the modern occupants, the ghost is handled with a mix of humor and reverence. While the political world focuses on the boxes in the bathroom or the meetings on the patio, there's a quiet understanding among the long-term staff that they are merely guests in Marjorie's house. They follow a set of unwritten rules. Don't move the original statues, don't speak disrespectfully of the founder, and always leave a light on in the library. Is Mar-a-Lago actually haunted? In a scientific sense, probably not. But in a historical sense, it is the most haunted house in America. It is haunted by the dreams of the Gilded Age, the scandals of the 21st century, and the ghost of an heiress who wanted her home to live forever. As we look toward the future of the mansion, the ghost of Marjorie Post remains the ultimate silent witness. She saw the rise of the cereal empire, the fall of the government's ownership, the hostile takeover by a New York developer, and the transformation of her bedroom into a command center for a global superpower. If walls could talk, these walls would scream. But at Mar-a-Lago, the walls don't scream, they whisper. And if you listen closely enough over the sound of the ocean and the helicopters, you might just hear the rustle of a silk dress moving toward the ballroom, ensuring that the gold leaf is still shining and the guests are still behaving, or at least making history. In 2026, if you attempt to fly a private plane or a high-end drone within 1 nautical mile of Mar-a-Lago, you won't just receive a warning on your radio. You will trigger a response from the most sophisticated domestic security apparatus in the world. The mansion that was once a winter retreat for serial heiresses has become a permanent, year-round, no-fly zone, a status typically reserved for nuclear power plants or the White House itself. The transition of Mar-a-Lago into a high-tech fortress is perhaps the most visible controversy of its modern era. It has turned the quiet, billionaire-filled skies of Palm Beach into a battleground between national security and local quality of life. The FAA's implementation of a 24/7 flight restriction, effective through at least October 2026, has fundamentally changed the geography of South Florida. Aircraft departing from Palm Beach International Airport, one of the busiest hubs for private and commercial travel, are now forced to take wider, steeper, and louder paths to avoid the 1-mile bubble surrounding the estate. This isn't just a minor inconvenience. It is a logistical nightmare that impacts over 300 flights a day. But the no-fly zone is only the tip of the spear. Inside the mansion, the security has moved far beyond men in suits with earpieces. By 2026, Mar-a-Lago has been integrated into the global military command structure. On January 3rd, 2026, the world saw the true power of the Winter White House Command Center, while the public saw photos of the president dining on the patio. Behind the scenes, Mar-a-Lago served as a literal nerve center for Operation Absolute Resolve, the military strike in Venezuela that captured Nicolas Maduro. From a secure room within the 110,000-square-foot estate, the president monitored real-time satellite feeds provided by the Space Force. This was a war room with a gold leaf ceiling. The irony was lost on no one. As the U.S. military projected power across the Western Hemisphere, the orders were being issued from a private social club where members were concurrently ordering martinis just a few hundred feet away. This dual-use nature of the property, half resort, half command center, creates a security challenge that is unprecedented in the history of the Secret Service. The layers of protection are now so dense they have become a source of local protest. The Coast Guard maintains a permanent security zone in the Intercoastal Waterway, blocking boaters from the very sea-to-lake vistas that gave the mansion its name. Palm Beach residents have reported that the constant low-flying security details and the rerouted commercial jets are rattling the foundations of their historic homes. But as the events of February 22nd, 2026 proved, the high-tech walls are not just for show. The breach by Austin Tucker Martin, the 21-year-old intruder who was shot and killed by Secret Service and Palm Beach deputies, revealed the hair-trigger nature of the modern Mar-a-Lago perimeter. Martin managed to enter through the north gate just as an employee was exiting, making it only 20 to 30 yards on the grounds before being neutralized. The incident forced a grim realization. The more Mar-a-Lago is used as a center for military and political power, the more it becomes a lightning rod for those seeking to make a violent statement. The mansion is now a hard target, equipped with thermal sensors, signal jamming technology that can drop unauthorized drones out of the sky, and specialized non-kinetic effect cells designed to prevent cyber espionage. The controversy of the fortress also extends to the Mar-a-Lago Court Society. Critics argue that this level of security, paid for by taxpayer dollars, is being used to shield private business meetings. In February 2026, the mansion hosted the World Liberty Forum, an invitation-only gathering of global finance and tech leaders, including CEOs from Goldman Sachs and Franklin Templeton. Because the entire property is a restricted security zone, the public and the press have zero access to see who is entering or what is being discussed. At the White House, there are visitor logs. At Mar-a-Lago, there is only a membership list and a velvet rope. This lack of transparency, backed by military-grade security, has led to accusations that Mar-a-Lago is effectively a sovereign state, where the laws of government oversight simply do not apply. The mansion's 75-foot tower, once designed for Marjorie Post to admire the sunset, now likely houses sophisticated surveillance and communication arrays. The black and white marble floors imported from a Cuban castle are now walked upon by Space Force guardians and Cyber Command specialists. As we look at Mar-a-Lago in 2026, we see a building that has outgrown its own history. It is a National Historic Landmark that functions as a military outpost. It is a home that requires a no-fly zone. It is a place where the grandeur of the 1920s meets the lethal precision of 21st century defense. The question for the future is how much longer a private club can sustain this level of global importance. With lawsuits from the town and protests from neighbors mounting over the noise and the closures, the no-fly zone around Mar-a-Lago has become a metaphor for the mansion itself, isolated, untouchable, and perpetually at the center of a storm. Whether it is protecting the president or protecting the world's most controversial secrets, the fortress on the Florida coast is locked down, and as the sun glints off the gold leaf and the drones patrol the perimeter, the message to the world is clear. Mar-a-Lago is no longer just part of America. It is a world unto itself. In the high-stakes world of Florida real estate, a property is usually worth what someone is willing to pay for it. But Mar-a-Lago isn't a usual property. Depending on who you ask in 2026, the mansion is either worth the price of a mid-sized office building or the GDP of a small nation. This valuation gap, a staggering chasm between $18 million and $1.5 billion, is not just a matter of accounting. It became the foundation for one of the most explosive civil fraud cases in American history. How can one house have two prices that are thousands of percentage points apart? The answer lies in the deed of conservation and the art of the appraisal. The controversy began in the New York civil fraud trial of 2023 and 2024. Judge Arthur Engeron, citing the Palm Beach County property appraiser, noted that between 2011 and 2021, the state was valued at between $18 million and $28 million. To the average person, $18 million sounds like a fortune. But in Palm Beach, where empty 2-acre lots sell for $200 million, an $18 million price tag for a 20-acre historic palace was seen by many as a joke. Donald Trump's reaction was immediate and characteristic. He claimed the judge was deranged and that the property was actually worth 50 to 100 times that amount, placing its value closer to $1.5 billion. But here is where the mystery deepens. Both sides were technically right, depending on which set of rules you play by. The $18 million figure was based on tax value. Because Mar-a-Lago is deed restricted as a private social club, the county appraises it based on the income it generates as a business, not its potential value as a single-family home. In the 1990s and early 2000s, Trump signed agreements that gave up the right to ever develop the land or turn the mansion back into a private residence. By doing this, he significantly lowered his property taxes for decades. He told the taxman the property was a club to save money, but when he went to the banks to get loans, he told them it was a development-ready masterpiece worth hundreds of millions. This valuation gymnastics is what the New York Attorney General called persistent and repeated fraud. The state argued that you cannot have it both ways. You cannot claim a low value for the tax collector and a high value for the lender. However, by 2026, the narrative has shifted yet again. Real estate experts on the ground in Palm Beach point to the Mar-a-Lago effect. In 2025, a home directly adjacent to the estate hit the rental market for a staggering $122,500 a month, nearly $1.5 million a year, just to live next door. If a neighboring house can command that much, what is the value of the Winter White House itself? Appraisers in 2026 now argue that the membership income approach used by the county is obsolete. They suggest that Mar-a-Lago belongs in a category of trophy assets like the Mona Lisa or the Empire State Building. There is no comparable for Mar-a-Lago. It is a 110,000 square foot fortress with a 75-foot tower, 36,000 antique tiles, and a history that includes hosting the world's most powerful people. To the right billionaire, it isn't worth $18 million or even $500 million. It is priceless. The financial mystery took a historic turn in late 2025 and early 2026. After the New York Appeals Court voided the massive $450 million fine against Trump, citing it as an excessive penalty, a new wave of economic freedom legislation began to move through Congress. Proponents argued that a valuation disagreement between a buyer and a seller should never be a crime if the bank wasn't harmed. They pointed to the fact that the banks involved in the Mar-a-Lago loans, like Deutsche Bank, testified that they made money on the deals and weren't defrauded. But the controversy persists. In February 2026, Congressman Jared Moskowitz once again called for a reality check on the mansion's taxes. He argued that if the president truly believes a property is worth $1.5 billion, he should be paying property taxes on $1.5 billion, not the $37 million valuation the county currently holds. If Mar-a-Lago were taxed at its market value, the annual bill would likely exceed $20 million, enough to fund the entire Palm Beach Police Department twice over. This financial tug-of-war illustrates the true nature of Mar-a-Lago. It is a place where reality is subjective. The value of the gold on the walls is measurable, but the value of the power within those walls is up for debate. As we look at the books in 2026, the financial story of Mar-a-Lago remains a paradox. It is a social club that generates $25 million in revenue, a tax-burdened landmark worth $30 million, and a presidential palace worth $1.5 billion. It is a hall of mirrors where the numbers reflect whatever the viewer wants to see. The mystery of its worth will likely never be solved until the day the property is actually sold on the open market, a day many believe will never come. Until then, Mar-a-Lago remains the ultimate symbol of the Trump economy, a world where perception is reality and a well-placed zero can turn a Florida club into a global empire. Of all the controversies that haunt the 17 acres of Mar-a-Lago, none are as dark or persistent as the mansion's link to the late Jeffrey Epstein. For years, this was a secret that the Palm Beach elite tried to bury under layers of gold leaf and legal NDAs. But as 2026 unfolds, the Gilded Age facade has finally cracked. With the passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act in late 2025 and the massive document dumps of early 2026, the world is finally seeing the unredacted truth about what happened behind the club's Mediterranean walls. The connection isn't just a matter of two billionaires sharing the same zip code. Jeffrey Epstein was a member of Mar-a-Lago for over a decade. He walked these marble floors, dined in the gold ballroom, and, according to newly released FBI files, used the club as a primary hunting ground. The most chilling revelation to surface in the February 2026 document drop involves the recruitment of Virginia Giuffre. For years, the story was treated as a he said, she said tabloid rumor. But the unredacted 2026 files contain sworn witness statements from former club employees that corroborate a terrifying timeline. In 2000, Virginia was a 15-year-old locker room attendant at the Mar-a-Lago spa. It was there, amidst the scent of expensive oils and the luxury of the winter White House, that she was reportedly approached by Ghislaine Maxwell. The documents describe a systematic poaching of staff. Epstein didn't just find victims in the outside world. He found them among the people working for the mansion. In a 2025 interview, Donald Trump attempted to clarify this, stating that he banned Epstein not for his crimes against children, but because he stole people who worked for me. He claimed he told Epstein, persona non grata, get out. But the 2026 files tell a more complicated story. According to a confidential brief released by the DOJ on January 30th, 2026, Epstein remained a member in good standing until 2007, long after the initial poaching of spa workers occurred. The files suggest the final break only happened after Epstein allegedly made an inappropriate advance toward the teenage daughter of another high-ranking Mar-a-Lago member. It wasn't a moral stand. It was a club rule violation. The controversy reached a fever pitch on February 24th, 2026, when an NPR investigation revealed that the publicly available Epstein database was missing dozens of pages specifically related to accusations involving the president. This missing minute of the digital files sparked a firestorm in Congress. Representative Maxwell Frost, having reviewed the unredacted versions in a secure DOJ facility, claimed the documents directly contradict the official White House timeline. He pointed to a specific FBI tip from the early 2000s, previously blacked out, alleging that Epstein had introduced a 14-year-old girl to Trump at the resort, elbowing him and saying, "This is a good one, right?" While no criminal wrongdoing by the president has ever been established in these files, the Epstein shadow has become an inseparable part of the Mar-a-Lago story. It paints a picture of a 1990s and early 2000s social scene where the lines between celebrity playboy and predator were dangerously blurred. The 2026 documents also highlight the role of the Mar-a-Lago spa as a focal point for international intelligence. The DOJ files suggest that because Epstein was recruiting victims from the club staff, multiple foreign intelligence agencies, including Mossad and the CIA, began monitoring the property as early as 2002. They weren't looking for sex trafficking. They were looking for blackmail material on the powerful men who frequented the club. This is a dark side of the mansion's history. While one part of the house was hosting NFL cheerleaders and Ziegfeld Folly-style parties, like the famous 1992 party where Trump and Epstein were the only male attendees, another part was being used as a staging ground for a global sex trafficking ring. As of late February 2026, the legal fallout is still mounting. Attorneys for over 200 victims have filed a petition to take down the DOJ's Epstein website, citing egregious violations of privacy because the government failed to redact the names of victims while protecting the names of the powerful clients. This failure has led to a new wave of internet sleuths descending on Palm Beach, looking for the physical locations mentioned in the files. The 2026 security breach by Austin Tucker Martin, who was reportedly obsessed with unsealing the Epstein files at the mansion, shows that this controversy is no longer just a legal debate. It is a source of real-world violence. Mar-a-Lago, for all its beauty and gold leaf, is now a place where two histories exist simultaneously. There is the history of the Winter White House and the American dream, and there's the history of the spa attendant and the predator. In 2026, as the redactions fall away, the world is realizing that you cannot have one without the other. The mansion has become a monument to the things we choose to see and the things we choose to ignore. But as the 3.5 million pages of the Epstein files continue to be indexed by Reddit users and AI investigators, the unredacted truth of Mar-a-Lago is finally stepping out of the shadows. In the ultra-exclusive island of Palm Beach, there is a saying, "Wealth whispers, but Mar-a-Lago screams." For nearly a century, the 17-acre state has been the center of a slow-burning civil war. But by early 2026, That war has escalated into a full-blown legal and social insurgency. The neighbors, many of whom are billionaires themselves, are no longer just complaining over cocktails. They are suing the federal government, forming quiet skies coalitions, and fighting for the very soul of the town they feel has been hijacked by a fortress of noise. The primary battlefield in 2026 isn't the ground, it's the sky. Since the Secret Service and the FAA implemented a permanent 24/7 1-mile no-fly zone around Mar-a-Lago in October 2025, the acoustic landscape of Palm Beach has been shattered. To protect the president, commercial jets departing from Palm Beach International Airport, PBI, are forced to bank sharply north or east, funneling thousands of flights directly over historic, high-value neighborhoods like Flamingo Park and El Cid. By January 2026, the data told a grim story. Noise complaints at PBI skyrocketed tenfold, from a typical 50 per year to over 600 in just a few months. Residents describe the sound as thundering, with some claiming they can see the bellies of planes from their trash cans. Venture capitalists and CEOs who bought $150 million homes for the silence are now waking up at 3 a.m. to the roar of a jet engine just a few hundred feet above their roofs. The controversy took a sharp legal turn on December 12, 2025, when Palm Beach County, along with the city of West Palm Beach and the town of Palm Beach, filed a massive federal lawsuit against the FAA. The petition for review demands that the government justify why these flight paths are necessary even when the president isn't in residence. For the neighbors, it's not just about noise. It's about inverse condemnation. The idea that the government has effectively taken their property value without compensation by destroying their quality of life. But the Palm Beach War isn't just about planes. It's about the very presence of the club in a residential zone. Since 1993, Mar-a-Lago has operated under a use agreement that was supposed to limit its impact. The agreement capped membership at 500, restricted how many days members could stay in guest rooms, and prohibited the owner from living there permanently. For 30 years, the town and the club have clashed over every detail. There was a great flagpole fight of 2006, where the town fined the club $1,250 a day for flying an 80-foot American flag that violated height codes. There was the helipad dispute, where the town eventually allowed a landing pad for the president, only to insist it be removed once he left office. But by 2026, the neighbors feel the 1993 agreement has been shredded. In early 2026, the town council faced a new wave of petitions from neighbors who claim the club has become a de facto military base. They point to the permanent Coast Guard blockades in the Intracoastal Waterway that prevent locals from boating past the estate. They point to the Secret Service bubble that closes Southern Boulevard and Mar-a-Lago Club's main gates, turning a 5-minute drive into a 40-minute ordeal for residents trying to reach their own homes. The social fabric of the island has frayed. In the elite clubs of Palm Beach, like the Bath and Tennis Club or the Everglades Club, membership at Mar-a-Lago is often seen as a political statement. You are either in the circle or you are a litigant. This division has turned dinner parties into minefields. The controversy reached a peak in February 2026, following the fatal shooting of intruder Austin Tucker Martin at the North Gate. While the Secret Service was praised for its quick action, the neighbors saw it as proof that the mansion is a magnet for violence. "We live in a town of hedges and quiet streets," one resident told the town council. "Now we live in a town of snipers and shotgun blasts. This isn't a neighborhood anymore, it's a green zone." The Palm Beach War is also a battle of economics. While the club brings in massive revenue and global attention, the Quiet Skies Coalition argues that the noise pollution is devaluing some of the most expensive real estate on Earth. They fear that if the no-fly zone becomes permanent, the old money will flee to quieter enclaves, leaving Palm Beach as nothing more than a backdrop for a political movement. As of late February 2026, the FAA has attempted a small compromise, tweaking the flight paths to vectors that are slightly more precise to avoid the most historic blocks. But for the thousands of residents still under the flight path, the relief is negligible. The legal battle is expected to drag on through 2027, pitting the town's wealthiest citizens against the power of the federal government. In the end, the Palm Beach War is a conflict between two different versions of America. One version believes that a historic landmark and a world leader's home should be protected at any cost. The other believes that even a president must be a good neighbor. As the sun sets over the Lake Worth side of the estate, and yet another commercial jet screams overhead, the battle lines are clear. Mar-a-Lago has conquered the politics of the nation, but has yet to conquer the hearts of the people living just across the street. In the world of international real estate, there are luxury homes, and then there are trophy assets. A trophy asset is a property that is so rare, so historically significant, and so culturally potent that it defies the standard rules of supply and demand. As we move through 2026, Mar-a-Lago has transitioned from being a mere Florida estate into a global financial anomaly. It is now whispered about in the same breath as the Chateau de Versailles, Buckingham Palace, or the penthouse at Central Park Tower, not just as a place to live, but as a global power brand. To understand the controversy of Mar-a-Lago's market value, you have to look at the billionaire migration of 2025. Following the shifts in the American tax landscape and the rise of Florida as the new financial capital of the South, Palm Beach real estate exploded. Empty lots on Billionaires Row that sold for $50 million in 2020 are now fetching $200 million. In this hyperinflated market, how do you put a price on a 20-acre, 126-room Mediterranean fortress with 475 feet of prime Atlantic beachfront? Real estate analysts in 2026 have coined a new term for this, the sovereign premium. Standard appraisals look at comparables, other houses nearby that have sold recently, but there are no comparables for Mar-a-Lago. You cannot compare a house where the FBI conducted a historic raid to a spec house built by a developer last year. You cannot compare a dining room where the Abraham Accords were discussed to a modern kitchen with a sub-zero fridge. Because of this, the market value of Mar-a-Lago has become a geopolitical debate. If the property were ever to hit the open market, the buyers wouldn't be local doctors or even American hedge fund managers. The potential buyers would be sovereign wealth funds from the Middle East, oligarchs from Eastern Europe, or tech titans looking for a legacy compound. To these buyers, the price isn't $18 million or even $500 million. To them, owning the Winter White House is a way to buy a piece of American history. However, the trophy status comes with a massive maintenance tax. By February 2026, the cost of keeping Mar-a-Lago at its gold standard has reached an estimated $5 million to $7 million annually. This includes the specialized labor required to maintain 15th century Spanish tiles in a corrosive saltaire environment, and the astronomical insurance premiums that come with a high-profile target in a hurricane zone. The controversy of its trophy status reached the halls of Congress in early 2026. Critics argue that the property's value is being artificially inflated by its political associations, creating a conflict of interest trap. If a foreign entity were to offer $1.5 billion for the estate, is that a real estate transaction, or is it a billion-dollar bribe for political influence? This security of asset question has led to calls for new legislation that will prevent presidential trophy properties from being sold to non-U.S. citizens. But for the Mar-a-Lago Club, the trophy status is a business model. The initiation fee, which famously jumped to $200,000 and then $1 million as the political stakes rose, is a subscription to power. Members aren't paying for pool. They are paying to say they belong to the world's most exclusive trophy. In the 2026 real estate projections, Mar-a-Lago is listed as the anchor of the Florida Gold Coast. Its presence has driven up the prices of every surrounding property. When a house near Mar-a-Lago goes on the market, it automatically commands a 20% premium. This is the irony of the Palm Beach War. The very neighbors who sue the club for noise are the same people whose net worth has increased by tens of millions because they live in the shadow of the most famous house in the world. The financial mystery of the trophy asset was further complicated by the 2026 Digital Twin Project. A group of developers attempted to create a one-to-one virtual replica of Mar-a-Lago in the metaverse, selling virtual memberships. The Trump organization immediately filed a multi-million-dollar trademark infringement lawsuit, asserting that the aesthetic of Mar-a-Lago, the gold leaf, the specific archways, and even the look of the ballroom, is a protected intellectual property. This move suggests that the mansion's value isn't just in the bricks and mortar, it's in the image. As we look toward the final chapters of the Mar-a-Lago story, the trophy asset remains a paradox. It is a burden to the town, a target for the FBI, and a nightmare for neighbors. But it is also the most sought-after piece of dirt in the Western Hemisphere. It represents the ultimate fusion of real estate and reality TV, of history and hype. Whether it is worth $1.5 billion or $37 million, one thing is certain. Mar-a-Lago has become the gold standard of a new Gilded Age. It is a house that cannot be bought, but is always being sold. It is a trophy that its owner refuses to put on a shelf, choosing instead to use as a shield, a sword, and a stage for the most controversial show on earth. As the market continues to fluctuate in 2026, the mansion stands still, a golden anchor in a sea of shifting political and financial tides. As of February 27, 2026, the story of Mar-a-Lago has reached its most surreal chapter yet. For years, the mansion was the center of a legal hurricane, a place where the Department of Justice and the FBI spent millions of dollars and thousands of hours trying to unseal the secrets of the boxes in the bathroom. But in a single week this February, the hurricane didn't just stop. It was as if it never existed. The Gilded Fortress has not only survived a legal firestorm, it has begun to erase the people who started it. The week began with a legal earthquake. On February 23, 2026, Judge Aileen Cannon, the Florida judge who has been the mansion's most consistent legal shield, delivered the final killing blow to the special counsel's work. She permanently blocked the release of Jack Smith's final report on the classified documents. To the public, this was a lost book of Mar-a-Lago. It was a 2-volume document that reportedly detailed every piece of intelligence found on the property and every witness statement from the staff. But Judge Cannon ruled that because the case was dismissed, the report was manifestly unjust. In her view, to release the findings would be to punish a man who remains, in the eyes of the law, innocent, with the stroke of a pen. The most detailed investigation in the history of the American presidency was locked away in a vault, likely never to be seen by the public. But the erasure of the Mar-a-Lago scandal wasn't limited to paper. It moved the people. On Wednesday, February 25, 2026, a purge sent shockwaves through the J. Edgar Hoover Building in Washington. FBI Director Kash Patel, the man who once claimed the documents at Mar-a-Lago were declassified by thought, ordered the immediate firing of at least 10 FBI agents and officials. Their common thread? They were the ones who had worked on the 2022 raid of the mansion. The justification for the firings was as controversial as the raid itself. Patel revealed that during the Biden administration, the FBI had secretly subpoenaed his own phone records, as well as those of current White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. He called it an outrageous and deeply alarming abuse of power by the previous leadership. By firing the agents involved in the Mar-a-Lago probe, the new administration isn't just changing the guard. They're sending a message that investigating the mansion is a career-ending move. The FBI Agents Association immediately condemned the move, calling it a violation of due process and a threat to national security. But in the world of 2026, the fortress on the coast has its own gravity. The agents who once walked through the gold ballroom with search warrants are now being scrubbed from the Bureau's rolls. This great purge has created a bizarre atmosphere in Palm Beach. On the morning of February 27, 2026, as the sun rose over the recently renamed President Donald J. Trump Boulevard, the mansion looked as serene as it did in 1927. The black and white marble floors were being polished. The top secret labels that once lay on the carpet were long gone, and the people who put them there were out of a job. But even as the legal records are blocked and the investigators are fired, the mansion remains a scene of fresh tragedy. The FBI and Secret Service are still processing the evidence from the February 22nd shooting of Austin Tucker Martin. While the motive remains under investigation, the incident serves as a grim reminder that even when the law stops knocking on the door, the rest of the world hasn't stopped watching. As of this morning, Mar-a-Lago has effectively achieved sovereign immunity. It is a place where the rules of discovery and the transparency of government reports have been defeated by the power of the presidency and the loyalty of a hand-picked judiciary. Critics call it the end of accountability. Supporters call it the end of a witch hunt. But regardless of your politics, the reality of 2026 is undeniable. Mar-a-Lago has won. The gold leaf is thicker than ever, The walls are higher, and the secrets are now officially part of the foundation, buried so deep that no court in the land can reach them. The mansion that Marjorie Post built as a winter White House has finally fulfilled its destiny. It is no longer a club, and it is no longer just a home. It is a monument to the fact that in America, if you have enough gold, enough lawyers, and a high enough office, you can rewrite history from your own dining room. The story of Mar-a-Lago doesn't end with a verdict. It ends with sunset over the Intracoastal, a no-fly zone overhead, and a silence so profound that you can almost hear the ghosts of the past and the secrets of the present, laughing at the world outside the gate.